All right, in the last video, this is where we got to. We created a function that will draw these noise lines, and we can control the amplitude and the frequency, the angle and the length of them. In the last part, what I'm going to do is control this with the sound of a sound file. And I've got a copy here of the example from the tutorial on sound where we were drawing the waveform. And remember, that's where this whole example started from. How could we draw a line that's less kind of noisy and chaotic than this one? Could we have something that looks more like a piece of string that's being manipulated by the sound? So that's what we're going to do. So the first thing is it's really good that we defined a function here, because now we can just actually copy that single function. Often a problem that you'll face when you're doing coding is you've worked on one part of the code in one sketch and another part's in the main sketch, and you've got to think about how to bring those two things together. Putting the code from your first sketch, the code that you want to use, into a function, so it's all self-contained in that function, makes it really much easier for you to bring different parts of code together. All I need to do here is copy this code, and with a few small changes I'll be able to run that in my new sketch. So if I go down beneath the draw function and paste that in, we'll be able to start using it. There we go. Now we will run into a couple of small problems just because we're getting our amplitude and frequency from these two sliders, which in the previous example were actually defined as global variables. So they are not available here. So let's just, and we can see if we try to call this function, let's say noise line from x equals, what's our canvas size? Okay. x10 and height over 2 with a length of width minus 20 and an angle of 0. So we're just going to draw a noise line across the middle of the screen. If I try and run that, I'll actually get an error because slide amp is not defined. It was a global variable in the previous example. So let's just, for now, we'll just create our amplitude with a set value. Let's make it 50. And let's make our frequency 0.01. That's a fairly good default. Now, why are we not seeing our line here? It could be that there's no stroke defined. I'm just going to comment the rest of this out for a second, just make sure that I've got everything working okay. I also need my noise offset to be included as a function. So I only provided 4 arguments. I actually need to provide 3. So my noise offset can just be 0. Let's set a stroke color. Stroke width 0.2550 and stroke weight of 10. Yes, it is showing up. So it might have just been that the stroke wasn't set properly in the previous one. Let's put this back in. Yep. So we've got our function working in that old sketch. And what we want to do is actually just control how that moves based on the music that's playing. It's really distracting for me to try and talk and have that playing at the same time. I'm just actually going to make the stroke to be blue for that background one with a lighter stroke weight. Just so we can see it there and think about the relation of the music to this new noise line. So one thing we can do is actually use the amplitude to get that out. So if we go back to the tutorial on sound, one of the examples there is measuring the amplitude of some sound. And if you look at that one, it's using this measure amplitude function. Just let me... I'm just going to mute the sound on my computer so I don't have to listen to that. So I use this analyzer equals new P5 amplitude object. And then I can just say analyzer.getLevel. So let's go to our little sketch. So I'm going to declare a global variable for the analyzer. Let analyzer and it was called p5.amplitude. And then we just say let amp equals analyzer.getLevel. Okay, so I've got that amplitude from the sound in this variable amp now. I want to pass that into my noise line to control it. So I'm just going to actually add that as another variable amp. And so that can be another argument to the function amp at the end. And then I can use that instead of just declaring my amplitude here. So let me just get rid of that. If I play this, we should see, let me, whoops. Oh, everything's happening. Okay, this one's, okay. So let me see. The amplitude is not changing that line very much, right? But remember that the amplitude as a number only goes between 0 and 1. So we probably need to map that to something a bit more meaningful. So where are we? So we're passing in the amplitude here. Let's actually make the amplitude a little bit larger. So say amp equals map amp, which goes from 0 to 1, to actually go from minus 100 to 100. So there you can see, now our line is actually moving in response to the music. I think that's lovely. I love this song whenever it plays. I think that's working, actually. I think that's working pretty well. Now we can add in those sliders again to change how much that amplitude is. So maybe rather than having minus 100, 100, we add in some sort of slider controllable parameter there so we can figure out what's a nice number. Also with the frequency, we've sort of hard-coded that in our noise function to be 0.1. We might want that to be smoother, 0.01, and that's going to give us a smoother line. We might want that to be a little bit rougher, so if we make that 0.05, it's going to be a kind of a rougher line. It really just depends on what we want that line to look like. But you can see that line is definitely responding to the music that's coming out there. One last thing that you might want to do is, rather than just drawing line segments like I've done, try using the begin shape and end shape functions and drawing curved segments here. I think that would improve the way that this line looks. But I'll leave that as an exercise for you. I think that we've actually done pretty well and delivered on what we were planning to do. So I'm going to end the example series there. Let me know in the forums if you have any further questions about this. Share some examples if you get it to work for yourself, and I'll put a link to the finished example beneath this final video. Good luck and happy creative coding.